Hi. Right. Hi.
Feel like I'm overwhelmed with too much stimulus and I can't do anything for it.
Oh, thank you.
Like more something, sometimes. I don't know, maybe obviously. Are you buffering? Uh, like yeah, that was really good. Yeah, it's buffering too. Okay. Yeah, I really am. It's been like a few days. You know how we go to work. Oh yeah, well, yeah, I know that. Uh, my cookie. Frank, I don't know if this ever happened to you. I have a retirement fund. I have to invest it again and things.
Oh,
So I've been dealing with like, what seems to me like a lot of money. It's not much more different. But that's a lot for me. Yeah. Well, no, I when I retire.
that's folding money.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to throw it around and I keep feel like, oh, I'm okay. Oh no, I'm not. That. Mr. Okay, I'll do that. I feel it. Why would my broker be Miller? Can you get a fee list fund? Yeah, I gotta get against that. I gotta find out the GRE. Yeah. Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. So, in a sense, we start the heavy lifting tonight. Again, the Tibetan tradition of mental development. And we're on chapter 9, which is the law of cause and effect. Um, um, yeah, Garvin Rinpoche said once that, all of Buddhism is the law of cause and effect. Those are all the conventional teachings, you might say, and emptiness, the absolute teachings. And of course, they're not really divided in two, but from our human perspective, that's how it appears to us, and that can be very helpful. But what does that say? It shows you the, you might say, the absoluteness or the validity of cause and effect, and also the humility with which we should approach it, because it's very easy for people to say, wisdom, 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 wisdom. And eh, truth be told, there's like a tendency, a popular tendency to skip over cause and effect. No need for prostrations, no need for mantra, no need for anything, just somehow me in my mind, but some of the me is always there. But nonetheless, the profundity of emptiness, though, people more easily kind of understand or at least appreciate. Whereas the cause and effect, somehow they don't understand that. But again, of these lists, one of these famous lists that the ancient Buddhists always loved to put together, the 10 difficult things. What are the 10 difficult things? I can't remember them all, but one of them is full knowledge of cause and effect. So it's profound. Number one of the 10. You might be right. I don't know. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. 10 things difficult to know. One is the how mantra works, and one is how medicine works, interestingly. And then, well, that's very difficult. But I wanted to share first because cause and effect is, in a way, seems kind of dry. And because it's so, there's just so much detail to it, and it gets a little heady and a little bit, tiresome. We're just sitting and listening. Um, Someone told me once about someone who had a teacher. This is a Tibetan, I guess, who had a teacher in Tibet, and I mean, they loved their teacher. Everything was fine, and they would have teachings like we do. What 2 hours? Let's have a break. Do another 2 hours. Okay, come on back tomorrow. Like that. That's what they were doing. This is more traditional, I think, in the early 1900s. And then they had another teacher. It's like not that they graduated or something, but it just worked out that they had another teacher, and they were kind of um, uh, expecting the same kind of thing. And yet, this is a Gaelic, I'm told. This Lama would have like a 20-hour teaching on karma. Yeah, what was I thinking today? Just random thought. I realized um, I was thinking about the phonograph and the fact that that's where I left technology. How do you have some disc of wax produce human sound, with the nuance of music? And I just thought, I can't. I can't. I'm just going to the Pure Land. That's enough. So we can get the greatness really of what. Oh no, just that you had to sit there for 20 hours, and I experienced something sort of akin to that, at least in the same uh, uh, box, you might put it. Because again, the practice at the Zen Center was very difficult for someone who's rigid like me, physically, and having to sit motionless for 35 minutes, and then you get 5 minutes of walking, and another 35 minutes, 5 minutes of walking, another 35 minutes. So you have sets of and then this goes on for 7 days. So I thought the idea of having to sit motionless, is just very, very difficult with knees and backs and all of that. And so when I found myself involved with the Tibetans, it was not like that. You could move, you could sit around. I just thought, oh, this is really going to be great. But then after, it just goes on and on and on. You don't get a little relieving bell at 35 minutes. It's just going on 2 hours, whatever. At any rate, you can move, but that doesn't give you any, it gives you a false sense of liberation because you can move and then you find out that moving ain't going to do it either. You're stuck in your body, whether you like it or not. So anyway, yeah. Forgive the asides. Yeah, so karma. Yeah. Um, the greatness is that the Tibetans have preserved these details of teaching because, as the Nagarjuna said, we go to the absolute by way of the conventional, the relative. So it's extremely important. And yet what strikes me is that it's extremely accessible. And yet we tend to discount it. Many people do. I shouldn't say we, but many people do discount it because it is accessible. You see, we don't have faith in our own Buddha nature. So if I'm understanding it, well, it can't be anything really profound or important. Someone made the joke once about a stockbroker. You might have some sort of genius kind of stockbroker living next door to you, really intelligent, really makes good decisions, knows his stuff, all of that. And yet he's next door, it's my neighbor Fred. Whereas some guy called you from a boiler shop in Long Island somewhere, and yeah, you think that guy must have some wisdom because you don't know him. What I think we lose also as Americans is this stream, this flow of devotion and tradition, which not only gives confidence, but gives kind of momentum to your practice. It's not just these conceptual ideas, but rather coming out of a mind that has confidence, a mind of faith. And of course, that's something that you can't really, you can't get from a book. You can't get from even an individual person can have tremendous faith, of course. But what a thing it is when you have, a whole culture like that. And we've largely lost that in the West. That's what's very sad. Megan, I shouldn't say Megan, is my granddaughters, Sarah and Emma, 4 years old. And what are they, 7 years old, something like that? 7 or 8 now, yeah. So maybe Emma's 5. I think, yeah, anyway. My granddaughters gave me this book. England's Antiphon. 1868. It's written by George MacDonald, who apparently was an inspiration to, is an author and I think an attorney too, but he was an inspiration to both C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. So he's a Christian writer, and he put together this book, which is just a survey of religious poetry in England from like the 1200s to the mid 1800s. But it's not about the poetry. I wanted to read a little bit of the introduction with this attitude, you might say, or the benefit and the wisdom. So though it has Christian terminology, it fits perfectly for Tibet, in my opinion, and for Buddhist if you just change the language. But he starts, if the act of worship be the highest human condition, it follows that the highest human art must find material in the modes of worship. The first poetry of a nation will not be religious poetry. The nation must have a history at least before it can possess any material capable of being cast into the mold of religious utterance. But the nation once possessed of this material, once the nation is once possessed, poetry is the first form of religious utterance. So he talks about poetry a little bit. But he talked about different sort of types of poetry, lyrics, ballads, etc., epics. But he says, of each of these I shall have occasion to speak, but as the title of the book implies, antiphon means the responsive song of the individualized choir. I shall have chiefly to do with this lyric or song form. So he's going to talk about songs. And, for me, it was so interesting coming from like a Western Zen tradition into the Tibetans with all the chanting, with all the shared sadhanas, with the tunes, with these sacred words that we were reciting and the meaning that goes with it. So it's this idea of song and the power of it. Supposedly the economist Keynes, this great, really kind of the core economist, his thought for the latter part of the 20th century, latter half anyway. But he once said, I won't die regretting that I had drunk too much champagne. And I've thought of this, that thought has inspired me, that quote sometimes. No one's going to regret having laughed too much when they die. No one's going to regret these moments of dedication, of devotion. In fact, you see things in their proper light. So the power of song, I mean, it's just really amazing that somehow the Dharma, through these practices, combines the power of the thought, the power of the teachings, with the natural kind of vehicle of song. I mean, it's so fundamental to us as humans. And when this is combined with, experiential based respect, love, devotion towards a great teacher, and then the common effort of Sangha, it's just so far beyond this dry kind of intellectual approach that so many of us, or that our educational system gives us. It's just like dead concepts that we're thinking about. Everything's equal. There's no hierarchy at all. You can study the thought of great religious figures, and then you can study, I don't know, pronouns. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We boil everything down on a level which is really not there. The hierarchy is all it's about. At any rate, antiphon, the responsive song of the individualized choir. That idea of it being responsive, there's this like a ringing of a bell, this back and forth going on. At any rate, for song is the speech of feeling. Even the prose of emotion always wanders into the rhythmical. Hence, as well as for other reasons belonging to its nature, it is one chief mode in which men and women, humans, unite to praise God. For in thus praising, they hold communion with each other, and the praise expands and grows. The individual heart, however, must first have been uplifted into praiseful song before the common ground and form of feeling, in virtue of which men might thus meet, could be supplied. So this is so significant, because it's not just sitting around, although there's obviously a feeling, you go to a rock concert, there's a certain thing, but there's this individual step beforehand where one has sort of touched your own song, and then the combination of that is especially powerful. But the vocal utterance or the bodily presence is not at all necessary for this communion. When we read rejoicingly the true song speech of one of our singing brethren, we hold song worship with him and with all who have thus at any time shared in his feelings, even if he have passed centuries ago into the high countries of song. In other words, dying. So this is something that we have the advantage of having plugged into. The people who did these practices, why is there stress on lineage? It's not some sort of political thing as a way to maintain power or to define yourself in terms of other beings. But it's the benefit. It's said that the lineage is like an electric wire. And the electricity, if that wire is not crimped or cut, the electricity flows through it. And so it's coming from the time of the Buddha what does it mean? It comes from the timelessness, the timeless nature of our mind. Dharmakaya, Dharmadhatu, all of these strange sounding words actually are, pointing at something that is really our true home. The texts that we do, like the prayers that we do on Sunday, some of them were composed by Jigten Sumgön. And some of the sadhanas go back all the way to Guru Rinpoche, and some back into India, and some, there are some texts all the way back. Well, they didn't have the text for a couple hundred years after the Buddha. But my point is that we're plugging into a stream of wisdom. So he said, I will build, if I may, like a chapel in the great Church of England's worship, gathering the sounds of its never-ceasing choir, heart after heart, lifting up itself into the music of speech, heart after heart, responding across the ages. Hearing, we worship with them. We must not forget that although the individual song springs from the heart of the individual, the song of a country is not merely cumulative, it's vital in its growth, and therefore composed of historically dependent members. No man could sing as he has sung had not others sung before him. This is such an antidote to the kind of, the narcissistic tendencies in our society, where, it's just my truth. It's just so painful to me, it's cutting yourself off from truth to call it my truth. Why would you do that? But we all know, we all have the tendency. It's my, right, exactly, because it's mine, Dave says. That is, to ask the question is the answer, right? Deep answereth unto deep face to face. Deep answereth unto deep, face to face, praise to praise. To the sound of the trumpet, the harp returns its own vibrating response, alike, but how different. The religious song of the country, I say again, is a growth rooted deep in all its story. But that verse, that statement, to the sound of the trumpet, the harp returns its own vibrating response, alike, but how different. And that's it. In this individual expression, we have to use words. But that individual expression is it's like they say, this mind stream of ours, it's like what passes over from one life to the next. They say it's like a flame being passed from one candle to another candle, or the seal being passed, a seal going into hot wax, and the seal is transmitted into that hot. What transfers? Well, if you think about it, there's nothing that transfers. The new flame, it's neither the same nor is it different. So it's this dynamic reality that normally we're always killing with our concepts. We want to make it something that we can attach to, because we think in attachment, that's where my liberation lies. So this image of the trumpet and then the harp responding just through the vibration of the sound, it's alike but different, like you said. And his two more. There's a sense, and he's talking. He's going to discuss the actual history. I mean, this is a big book. I haven't gotten into it really at all, except for this introduction. There's a sense in which I may, without presumption, adopt the name of choragus, or leader of the chorus, in relation to these singers. I must take upon me to order who shall sing. So he's talking about the exposition he's going to do here of these different religious poems from England. He said, but I must take upon myself to order who shall sing, when he shall sing, and which of his songs he shall sing. But I would rather assume the office of the master of the hearing, for my aim shall be to cause the song to be truly heard, to set forth worthy points in form, in matter, and in relation, to say with regard to the singer himself, his times, its modes, its belief, such things as may help to set the song in its true light, its relation, namely, to the source whence it sprung, which alone can secure its right reception by the heart of the hearer. So how significant? See, the whole point is point to the source, you might say. Again, we're forced to use language. And so Nagarjuna talking about absolute truth, relative truth, really, if you're conceptualizing absolute truth, it's not the absolute truth, but we have to try to get there. And by using our mind in the right way. So here you are. Its relation, namely, to the source whence it sprung, which alone can secure its right reception by the heart of the hearer. And that's the paradox. Because unless there's this connection, you might say, and that's what devotion is, this felt kind of connection, although we can't really put our finger on it or even conceptualize it, but somehow that the individual expression is that at the same time. For my chief aim will be the heart, seeing that although there is no dividing of the one from the other, the heart can do far more for the intellect than the intellect can do for the heart. Then one more. He said, in the silence of the monastery, unnatural as that life was, germinated much of this deeper life. As we must not judge of the life of the nation by its kings and mighty men, so we must not judge the life in the church by those who are called rabbi. The very notion of the kingdom of heaven implies a secret growth, secret from no affectation of mystery, but because its goings on are in the depths of the human nature, where it holds communion with the divine. In the church, as in society, we often find that which shows itself uppermost is but the froth, a sign it may be of life beneath, but in itself worthless. When the man arises with a servant's heart and a ruler's brain, then is the summer of the church's content. But whether the men who wrote the following songs moved in some shining orbit of rank or only knelt in some dim chapel and walked in some pale cloister, we cannot tell, for they have left no name behind them. So I was very moved by that, because this kind of expression of this real kind of devotion, you just don't see that represented. It's there, but it's like hidden, for individual people and probably individual communities who come together. But they're not on cable TV, that's for sure. But it also struck me, I guess, from my own experience, of this special quality that the Tibetans have by virtue of their history and tradition. Again, not as a dead thing, like something that's in a museum, but the livingness of it. And that for them, they, not all Tibetans, of course, but they often have that kind of more naturally. Whereas for us, I mean, this has been the challenge of a Dharma Center too, is that's why, we've always had some sort of emphasis on working on ourselves, because for a Western audience, we don't necessarily know any of these terms at all. And we certainly don't have the tradition and the kind of felt, we can have a felt rapport with it, but we don't even know why. Of course, Tibetans might not know why either, but I think there's a greater natural kind of confidence. I mean, I had a Tibetan person that I very much respect, talking with him once, and was talking how it came about that he was able to uh, get the money to buy a house. And, he was talking about one of the, like say in Vajrakalaya, you're Vajrakalaya, and you've got four great gatekeepers around you, and then there's a whole bunch of protectors and other beings that Vajrakalaya can send out to destroy obstacles like that. And he had one of those kind of protectors just sort of be there with him. I mean, in his mind, and he and as he talked to me, he just sort of became it. I mean, it was very kind of wonderful to see. But again, totally humble. I mean, not saying it's like in America, you do something, you put it on out there to advertise it or something, but not that at all. It's just completely normal, completely humble, not saying he's anything, nothing, none of that. It just, but had to do with buying a house. And I thought, how wonderful that is like one stream in his mind. All right. So anyway, forgive that little aside, but I wanted to share that because I just thought the feeling of it was very helpful. Christian terminology, but you can easily put it together.
Method, the material that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, again, wisdom, experience, understanding of emptiness, and then method is karma. Method of the relative, wisdom is the absolute. Rinpoche has said too that the practice of compassion is simply having that attitude, considering every being you come across as having been your mother. And the practice of wisdom is just regarding all of this as a dream, dreamlike. So he's a genius, the way that he can kind of boil it down and how simple it is, because we can get lost in all the details in that, certainly. Yeah, it keeps you on the path, in the midst of everything. It's good. And so then when you get into some big kind of trouble, and then suddenly occurs to you, oh my goodness, this is actually dreamlike. Doesn't seem that way to me. I'm really stuck in this whole thing. I'm having big time suffering here. It doesn't seem like a dream. And the same thing with compassion regarding others as your mother, rather than that annoying son of a bitch who's tell, telling you you're not representing her daughter rightly. So there's endless opportunities to practice. That's the thing. But it's the memory, so to speak. This is the mindfulness, is keeping on the task. And the awareness is what keeps us there. So we fall off again and again and again. But the awareness, which is our nature, the awareness recognizes, you've slipped here. You've become distracted. And that's the process. But you see too how faith is so important, because good grief, if you're being honest with yourself, and this is what meditation can do, you see just like every moment is just an assault of distraction. And many times people, if they don't know, if they don't have the grounding, the understanding, how does that come? Well, one, you can do all sorts of study. This is what Kempo does all the time. He's providing us with the tools to allow us to analyze our own mind, to analyze our own situation. Is that true? Is that not? But that's the practice, is working on it. Or there's just the direct thing of, you're inspired by someone like Garwin Pache, and in a way, it doesn't matter what kind of goof ups you're doing, because that inspiration is just there. And you can come from a place of complete not knowing, and that's not necessarily bad. There's a part of not knowing, which is dropping our attachment to our drama and our mind stream, our thoughts, our conceptual sixth level of consciousness. But then there's a not knowing that doesn't know but wants to know, and that's a great sustaining thing. So all of this The other thing is when they talk about the traditions again, to me, it's it's like when the Dalai Lama, when they gave the Dalai Lama the Nobel Peace Prize in 1982. For all of us, well, that was a wonderful thing, of course, but for other people of the world, I mean, people didn't know anything about the Dalai Lama, but you kind of assume that the Nobel Committee checked him out a little bit. So suddenly there's more, it's easier to have confidence. And of course, that's a good thing. And then you can determine for yourself whether that's valid confidence or not. But I think it's a wonderful thing when suddenly, Dalai Lama's popping up on The Simpsons. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. Yeah. Forgive me, I've told this joke before, but it's like I saw the thing on The Simpsons where Lisa Simpson, that precocious little girl, decides she's a Buddhist and she has conviction. So she's in her second story bedroom, and she goes to her bedroom and throws the window open if it wasn't open already, throws the sash up, and she says, "I'm a Buddhist." And at that point, the tree outside the house is filled with a flock of crows or blackbirds or starlings or something, and they all fly off together. This big black cloud. And of course, their next door neighbor is the fundamentalist Christian, Ned Flanders. And he's alerted psychically to the birds flying. And he grabs his kids and said, "Okay, kids, we're going down into the fallout shelter." So he's in the basement. They're locked in there. So this is all good. This is all good. All right. Forgive me so much. We'll start now with a little cause and effect. There we go. All right, chapter 9, laws of cause and effect. And Geshe Darge says, taking refuge protects one from falling into the lower states of rebirth for only a few lives, whereas following the teachings of the Triple Gem gives eternal protection from these realms. Buddha has given guidance and teaching to many beings. However, these teachings can only be of benefit if they are followed. The main teaching of the Buddha concerns the law of cause and effect. And regardless of how much one may know about the Dharma, if one does not act in according with this, there can be no benefit. By means of this power of clairvoyance, Atisha's guru saw that a yogi had taken birth in a hell. Whereupon he told Atisha, until you attain freedom from the delusion of self-grasping, follow the law of cause and effect. Again, Atisha's guru was in Indonesia. Until you attain freedom from the delusion of self-grasping, follow the law of cause and effect. Until the path of preparation has been attained, it's always possible to fall back into the lower realms. So again, you remember the five paths. There's the which is he calls the path of preparation. I'm going to go to the 5 paths right now, see how he terms them. The path of accumulation is the first path. And the path of preparation is the second, I believe. Yeah, the path of preparation. I sometimes think of this as the path of accumulation is all the meritorious things we're doing. You're building up like inertia, momentum in the mind. So instead of just this pointless going around in circles, which is ordinary samsara, ordinary thinking, everything, there's now like some directiveness to the mind and the efforts. And it's the accumulation of merit. And of course, this is great. because like with momentum, you get in a bad situation, maybe you just blow right past it. This is instead of getting entangled. But this momentum, this path of accumulation, leads to the next path, which he's calling the path of preparation. Preparation for what? Preparation for insight into deep, vast emptiness. But I've sometimes turned to the path of preparation, just thinking of it is like now you're using that energy, that merit that you've gained, to applying it, to looking into the nature of the mind itself. So instead of your meditation becomes stronger because instead of just sort of fighting with our distractions, now there's some shamatha, some calm, and one can rest more easily into the object of meditation, rest more easily into the nature of the mind itself, although it's still appearing itself as some outer object. There's still that split going on in the mind. But the whole thing is within the ambit, you might say, of awareness. So it's all awareness, and that's more fundamental or higher, you might say. So all of that's happening, but nonetheless, so he says that until the path of preparation has been attained, it is always possible to fall back into the lower realms. So that indicates a deeper kind of engagement with our own mind, but nonetheless, continuing with Geshe, just as motivation is the start of meditation, practice in accordance with the law of cause and effect is the start of religious training. For beginners, right understanding means being in accordance with the law of cause and effect. Later, it is the understanding of emptiness and the 12 links of interdependent origination. All joy and suffering depend upon cause and effect. Although all beings in samsara seek joy, it is difficult to find because they do not create the causes which lead to joy. In order to understand both levels of truth, conventional and ultimate, one first needs to understand the law of cause and effect. Between emptiness and the law of cause and effect, the latter, cause and effect, is more difficult to understand fully. Oh, yes, I had heard this before. So that's amazing, isn't it? We all appreciate kind of the profundity of emptiness, and there's so much talk and thinking about that. But we tend to say cause and effect, that's like for, it's for the kindergarten class. Between shunyata, emptiness, and the law of cause and effect, the latter, the law of cause and effect, is more difficult to understand fully. For although many arhats have realized emptiness, only the fully enlightened ones, the Buddhas, are able to determine or trace all the causes for a specific condition. Understanding of emptiness and the law of cause and effect support one another, and each is incomplete without the other. Then he starts to get into it. He says, there are 3 levels of contemplation on the law of cause and effect. Here are the 3. Meditation on the general aspects of cause and effect. Meditation on the specific aspects, that is, the 10 non-virtuous acts. And then 3, actually living in accordance with the law of cause and effect. 3 levels of contemplation. Let's touch a little bit on the general, and we won't even get through that this time, but we can at least start on it. And then, the general aspects of the law of cause and effect. 4 main characteristics. Karmic seeds inevitably ripen in accordance with their cause. That is, virtue leads to joy, non-virtue to sorrow. So it's kind of funny because in this shifting world, there's actually something you can rely on. And yes, you can get into the fact that, well, it's all just emptiness, but we often have this dangerous view of emptiness. It's like the story, forgive me for telling it again too, but the American who went to Japan in the early 1950s and was visiting various temples, teachers, And Japanese temples, sometimes they have these kind of, it's like a veranda, overlooking. You can sit in this beautiful garden, Japanese garden in front of you, and it's very peaceful and beautiful. But you can sit on this small veranda, like individual size almost. Um, um, at any rate, this man, he was waiting to see the teacher, and um, whatever the situation was, he's sitting on this veranda by himself, and he had to urinate. It's getting very uncomfortable because where there's no bathroom around here. I mean, I've had this experience in Japan itself. You can't even read what the sign says, bathroom here, stupid. It's like, so there's a lot of anxiety over these things. Well, anyway, so he's on this is a true story. This guy's on this veranda, and he's having to urinate, and he's looking around, and what do I do? So, well, desperation, he stands on the edge of the um, veranda and just starts peeing into the garden. And of course, at this moment, the teacher comes in. And the teacher says, no pissing in the garden. And the American, who, of course, was very intelligent and lots of book learning in that, started to give the teacher, some teaching. And he was saying, well, it's just emptiness. Urine is empty. The garden is empty. All these things are empty. He goes through this whole spiel, and the teacher just stops for a moment and looks him in the eye and says, no pissing in the garden. So this is the unity of absolute and relative. So karmic seeds inevitably ripen in accordance with their cause. Virtue leads to joy, non-virtuous to sorrow. So in this empty world, there's something we can rely on in the way that we need. Two, because a karmic act has many effects, just as one grain of rice produces many grains, the store of karmic seeds is ever increasing. Third general principle is, if a certain cause is not produced, its result will not be experienced. And then fourth, karmic seeds never lose their potency. All right, so regarding the first, that karmic seeds inevitably ripen in accordance with their cause, the Buddha once said, sentient beings do not understand the law of cause and effect. For while all seek joy and shun suffering, they do not exert themselves in following virtue and avoiding non-virtue. If one contemplates the certainty of the law of cause and effect, that's the end of the quote. And now, if one contemplates the certainty of the law of cause and effect, one will surely follow virtue, realizing that the law of cause and effect holds true both within this life and from one's present life to the next. One should carefully guard one's acts. If an unvirtuous act is performed, one must apply the four opponent powers, for there is nothing the Buddha can do when one's non-virtuous karma has ripened into suffering. In Buddha Shakyamuni's time, there lived a monk who had a most beautiful voice, but an extremely ugly body. One day a king visited the Buddha and overheard the lovely voice of the monk while he was chanting his prayers. The king was so attracted by the voice that he asked if he might see the monk. The Buddha replied that the monk was better heard and not seen. As my parents say, better seen and not heard. So the Buddha replied that the monk was better heard and not seen, but he gave the king permission. Upon seeing the monk's ugly countenance, the king asked Buddha the cause. And the Buddha replied that after the passing away of the third Buddha, this man had been one of the workers building a great stupa in reverence to that Buddha. During its construction, he had continually complained that the stupa was too large, and this was the cause for his later ugly appearance. However, when the stupa had been completed, he repented of his previous complaints and adorned the top of the stupa with a melodious bell, hence his later endowment of a beautiful voice. Isn't that a beautiful story? On another occasion, near Rajgir, where the Buddha spent many rainy seasons, there lived a woman who laid 32 eggs, which grew into men. Her 32 sons all became ministers of the king, but there was a former minister who hated them and wished to see them killed. In order to have his wish fulfilled, he told the king that the walking sticks of these 32 ministers were really weapons and that they were plotting to assassinate him. The king then ordered them all beheaded and their heads sent in a box to their mother. The box was delivered as the Buddha was teaching the mother about emptiness. And he, knowing the contents of the box, told her to finish hearing the teachings before opening it. During this discourse, she became an Arya, one who has fully realized emptiness. Afterwards, upon opening the box and seeing the heads of her sons, she was not greatly agitated, but calmly asked the Buddha for the cause. He answered that in a past life, her 32 sons had been thieves for whom she had acted as a housekeeper. They had all stolen a cow, which later took rebirth as the king, and slaughtered it in her house. It is essential to understand the law of cause and effect. Study and contemplation are necessary for this understanding. The following 3 texts are the most important sutras on this subject. Having read and understood them, one will no longer desire any form of existence in samsara. So that's interesting. It's essential to understand the law of cause and effect. Study and contemplation are necessary. Because also, here in the way it's expressed in the Drikuing, these traditions, these lineages, within the lineage, there are 3 lineages, right? There's the lineage of blessings, there's the lineage of realization, there's the lineage of the scriptures. So that's what the Kempos are especially tasked to do, this lineage of the scriptures. And again, I'm expressing my own kind of a Western kind of not knowing or half knowingness or whatever. You hear the blessings, the realization, the blessings of realization, the lineage of realization. It says, yes, that's what I want. That's it. That sounds great. And when you hear the blessing, the lineage of blessings, well, before practicing tantric Buddhism, it was a little bit vague or not known or not even thought about. But the blessings of the scriptures sounds like, oh, we don't need that one. It's like, just speaking from my own kind of skepticism, native skepticism and clinging. And yet, to understand cause and effect, he's saying study and contemplation necessary. And what a statement. Following 3 texts of the most important sutras on this subject, having read and understood them, one will no longer desire any form of existence in samsara. Wow. Well, unfortunately, he has them in the transliterized Tibetan, which I can never read. One is a sutra containing many instances of the working of law of cause and effect. We'll have to have Kempo tell us what these sutras are. Then a sutra showing how to discriminate between virtuous and non-virtuous. And then the third one is called the Sutra on Mindfulness. Okay. One more story here. No, this is a good place to stop because this is the second characteristic of cause and effect. So that first one that we just did, again, was that karmic seeds inevitably ripen in accordance with their cause. The second one, we'll start next time, is because a karmic act has many effects, just as one grain of rice can produce many grains, the store of karmic seeds is ever increasing. So we'll start. The second characteristic of the general characteristics, the law of cause and effect. Okay, any questions? Anything by anybody today? Yeah, hold on, Mike.
Just a minor visual on, like, I'm saying 1 grain of rice. And then if you want a lot of something, you eat a bowl of rice, right? I mean, because there's like thousands of grains of rice in there. So that really kind of hits home with how powerful, karma could be.
Yeah.
You could just think it's just one small grain of rice, but then he's saying it creates many,
Yeah.
right? And then you see the result of it when you have a bowl of rice. There's like thousands of grains of rice in that little bowl, right?
It gets vast fast. Double daily. Oh.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, it's kind of a logarithmic kind of expression, It is scary. But it also, in an inverse way, kind of gives a resonance or an understanding of when we're reading like the aspirations of Samanta Bahadra, and they're talking about, I can't even remember what it is, but it's like in, each dust mote, there's a billion Buddhas. And it's just like, that's the same thing, but expressed in this kind of positive way. Yeah. Yeah. And there's certain sense here too, because I noticed in this chapter 9 is long, and that's so fascinating to me that the detail that goes into that. It's just like sort of was a trick as a student, right? When you were in a lecture class, and if the teacher was really spending a lot of time on a particular thing, you could kind of understand that maybe that was going to be on the final exam. and you see your buddy, give Steffi the mic, and you see your buddy who was just more hungover in class and missed it totally. Some of the simple things. Yeah, Steffi.
So if karmic seeds are ever increasing, um, we also have seeds that are popping off and then going away, right? So, but they're increasing faster than they're decreasing. Is
Right.
that right?
Yes. Yes. And that's why we still experience what people can get discouraged.
Right.
It's like it's not this instantaneous, born again. I mean, there is that aspect for sure, but you got to be real too. We're still it's like a tsunami of our karma. Every moment. Isn't it amazing? Of course, this is a great thing of the meditation too, which, so often discourages new people. When you just see that tsunami of unbidden thoughts and just all that stuff, you get a sense, yeah, there's this karmic process ripening again and again and again and again. And so it naturally builds a certain kind of humility with it. You see like, oh my goodness. So you just can't. I mean, you can have not you, but a person could have the most arrogant kind of mental habit going on. And yet when you see that once, if you don't suppress it, ignore it, and all that, it just puts a crack in samsara that you can't get rid of it. You realize, my goodness, that's not the whole picture. And there's all this inner stuff happening, the normal people don't see. It's unbelievable. Then when you start to realize that that's actually, it shows you like this again, the vastness of it. The vastness is something that normally we're kind of afraid of, because we want some safe little refuge. It's just remarkable to me. And of course, that you can see how that relates to commitment too. And you want to make sure you're committed to something that's valid, but at the same time, it's a hard step for people. Years ago, someone came to the Dharma Center, and he was the boyfriend of one of our members. And she's moved away now, but she's a wonderful practitioner, a student of Lama Tarchan's too. And she had a new boyfriend, and she dragged him to the Dharma Center. And he was a nice guy, but he wanted to talk to me after the morning session. And he took me aside and he said, I just want to tell you something. I'm not doing any prostrations. I said, okay, did I tell you had to do a prostration? And why do you think it's me telling you to do these things? I just gave the talk this morning. I'm a bump on the log. Well, that's it, Keen. That's a great point. Keen just said, can we not also create a tsunami of merit? And that is it. That kind of understanding, suddenly that is empowerment. We are empowered. We're not just, silently suffering in our little corner of our mind. No, when you see that the vastness of the distraction, the nature is vast. Yeah.
So that's what I was going to basically, comment on, because all movements of the mind are creative. And so what you were just saying from what Keen's thing is just like, so morals and ethics and applying goodness is you just kind of have to overwhelm the bad with the good. Is that basically the plan?
Absolutely. It's like this stream of purification, this great text, the path of purification. Shuddhamaga, I can't remember the writer, one of the great figures in India way, way long ago. And once one has sort of the confidence in that, then, the difficulties become just grist for the mill, so to speak. So it becomes, instead of something that you're trying to run away from or hoping never happens, you suddenly realize it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Yeah, someone said once, I mean, one of the great things of patience is just, sort of, but even just in worldly planning, you expect the worst. And then whatever comes up, you can deal with it. But to know from karmically that these things are happening because you've seen the process in your own mind. And then suddenly, some people are just totally devastated when some sort of suffering happens to them because they have this idea that there shouldn't be any suffering. And somehow, especially with them. And rather, you become a natural kind of humble. Again, you can have an outer appearance that is totally arrogant jerk, because that's what you've been building up over lifetimes. But within that, it's not 100% anymore. It's like I'm sort of out of control. I'm doing
That's where you talk about the crack in the foundation.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, when you understand the 5 Buddha wisdoms, that becomes that arrogance becomes the great, all-accomplishing wisdom of Ratnasambhava, the jewel being. So it's all very beautiful, Okay,
Thank you, Frank.
you got it. Let's do a short dedication. May our efforts this evening ripen into the benefit for all motherly sentient beings. May we never lose track of the fact of our gratitude to these beings who have sustained us, who sustain us now, and who we will not rest until are liberated. Svaha. Okay. Okay, wasn't that nice of Emma and Sarah to send me this book?